Everything about this movie is iconic.
The logo design is on point. On the building, on Ecto-1, I love it. Apparently the line is flipped over in Europe, but they also didn't have a ghost either.
Everything about this movie is iconic. We are more than 35 years after this film came out. It was supposed to be a one-off silly comedy about what if there was a group of exterminators, just regular Joes in New York, except it's ghosts. Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be funny? And like, the firehouse is iconic. If you go to the firehouse in New York, they have permanently on the sidewalk in front of the firehouse their logo, which has the Moogly, the ghost, and the Ghostbusters logo in there. Inside, they have the Ghostbusters 2 sign and a wall full of patches from all of the different Ghostbusters franchises around the world. There are Ghostbusters franchises around the world that are like officially sanctioned by Sony and Ghost Corps, which is the company that handles the Ghostbusters license. Like, and they're cool with it, unlike so many other things where, well, you can't go to this thing dressed as a Disney character, we'll sue you, if you say you're Disney. Like, Ghostbusters loves their fans because they know that it keeps the brand alive.
I think what really sells Ghostbusters comes down to, like, marketing.
And I am not kidding. They are literally all over the world, and it's insane. Here in Minnesota alone, I think there's 4 or 5 different franchises. Ghostbusters North, Minnesota Ghostbusters, Twin Cities Ghostbusters, Ecto MX5, North Star Ghostbusters, and then like in between Minnesota and Wisconsin, there's Ghostbusters Medicorps, which was a group of EMTs that love Ghostbusters. And it's such an easy thing to get into in terms of cosplay, where you can put a suit together relatively cheap compared to a lot of other like accurate costumes, and then you just go out and you can start doing events.
To me, one of the most endearing aspects of Ghostbusters is the tech. The proton packs, the jumpsuits, the ghost traps, the Ecto-1, and their HQ.
And the suits are iconic. The proton packs are beyond iconic. Slimer is iconic. Again, the firehouse is iconic. The Ecto-1 is an iconic car. It's one of the most famous movie cars of all time. You cannot see that car and not know it.
And really just like prop design. Whoever did the prop design, they were brilliant.
It all makes it feel really tangible.
Like, one of the key things about selling a popular product is to have a noticeable silhouette, not even the product itself, just the silhouette of the product. So when you see the Ghostbusters backpack, or even the like the floor trap, when you see the logo, when you see the ambulance, like all of these silhouettes are extremely unique and they stand out.
It definitely captured my imagination as a kid. And yes, I know it's not much of a kid's movie, but they definitely, I mean, they did a cartoon based off of it. And so, yeah, no. It's just like with the Batman Returns Happy Meal toys all over again.
And even the end of this movie shows Ghostbusters t-shirts. So not only do you have all of these things that are extremely unique, but then at the very end, it's like, by the way, you can just go out and buy this right now. Like, this stuff is here for sale.
When the Ghostbusters are broken eating Chinese food, there's like 4 arcade cabinets in the back. Was that a necessary business expense, Ray?
The Ghostbusters eventually get their very first case where they are hired to remove a gluttonous ghost from the Sedgwick Hotel, which we will eventually come to love as Slimer.
The night manager played Minister Krolla in the Star Trek Next Generation episode, First Contact. I was actually a guest on that episode of Too Young for This Trek. Michael Ensign has been in several series of Star Trek, including DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. Go figure. The guy makes a habit of it.
Up until this point, they have developed the high-tech nuclear-powered equipment, but they have yet to actually test it.
Wait, they were walking around with unlicensed nuclear accelerators? Meanwhile, Chekhov spent 1986 walking around asking for uranium. If they just showed up 2 years earlier, they could just gone to New York and pick one up.
You know, it's just occurred to me, we really haven't had a completely successful test of this equipment.
So they accidentally blow up a housekeeping cart, but, you know, that's a successful test, right?
Was the hotel doing a midnight buffet? I thought that was only a cruise ship thing.
And Egon warns them to never cross the streams.
Don't cross the streams.
If you do, apparently the result is potential catastrophic explosion, killing everybody. That's also one of the most quotable phrases. Don't cross the streams. That's right up there with nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
The best line in this movie is, "We should split up so we can do more damage that way."
I love how the proton streams burn through the walls and the floor. That was a nice touch. I've always loved that effect.
Funniest or scariest moment? I didn't prepare for any of these questions. The funniest or scariest moment in this film? Probably Venkman being slimed, right?
And then I guess the only other really protagonists are the ghosts themselves.
You know, I think Slimer's a fun character when he's first introduced. I don't really understand why he looks like a green turd, but, you know, it works.
You have Slimer, who is, he's a green little blobby ghost. Basically, the reason he's called Slimer is because he slimes Peter Venkman. He basically passes through him and covers him in the slime.
That said, I do think he's kind of been overused since then. Kind of overstayed his welcome.
The Slimer is very popular. I don't really much care for him. He's not that interesting to me. He's notable for, sliming people. He's green, he's blobby, and he eats a lot. That's his gimmick, and I don't know. He's just not that interesting to me.
And while John Belushi may not be in the movie, he's there in spirit. Literally and figuratively in the guise of Slimer. It's not apparent, but when you see it, it's obvious.
According to some stuff I've heard, apparently Slimer was in a way a reference or homage to a lot of John Belushi's characters. I guess since he passed away not too long before this.
Go watch Animal House and you'll get there.
He isn't even really that scary. Although I guess in real life, seeing something like that charge at you probably would be a little bit unnerving. In the grand scheme of like all the other ghosts around, he is not exactly the scariest one. As a matter of fact, and then in the cartoon later, he's very friendly. So.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
After destroying a fair amount of the hotel, they eventually capture Slimer, and they are able to deposit it in the containment unit in the firehouse.
They charged $5,000 to capture Slimer. At least they paid off the car doing that.
And then, of course, after causing more damage than they fixed, they bill the hotel, threatening to re-release the ghost they caught.
After this, supernatural activity begins to rise throughout the entire city, so the Ghostbusters are continuing to become more and more popular. Everyone is becoming aware of their antics and their exploits. We have a fun little montage bringing this all together because, come on, everybody needs a montage.
Nothing like a montage to get rid of character and story development.
Even Rocky had a montage.
Rip Larry King. Back when he was radio only, too. He went on CNN the next year. Also, love the cameo by Casey Kasem.
They are featured in Time, in Globe, USA Today, The Atlantic, where Venkman looks a lot like Phil Collins for some reason.
I do like that this movie asks if ghosts have rights. I don't remember enough to wonder if they brought that back up again, or they'll bring it up in the new movie, but it seems kind of woke.
Behind the scenes trivia. So there is sort of an infamous scene that a lot of people forget exists in this film, partially because I think it was cut out of the version that was shown on television.
The one scene that I'm sure people will bring up that's always been weird.
In hindsight, I obviously know what scene got her all riled up. And to be fair, it's one of the oddest scenes in the flick.
And there's more than one really, but it's the one that stands out is during the montage to the Ghostbusters theme where you see them kind of growing in popularity and blah, blah, blah.
And there is a scene while they're playing, I think it's the Ghostbusters theme song, and it's a montage of them going out capturing ghosts. And you see everybody sleeping in the firehouse. And then we fade into a dream that Ray Stantz is having, where he's wearing an admiral's coat and is lying in bed, and a ghost floats down on him and then disappears.
Now, also in this scene, we do have, a little bit of, let's say, spiritual oral gratification that Ray received.
There's a scene where Dan Aykroyd's Ray Stantz, apparently receives oral sex from a ghost.
Which, good for him, I guess. Like, that's consensual, unlike the shit that Venkman's trying to pull.
And then his belt unzips and his pants get pulled down.
It's very strange.
And he goes cross-eyed and leans back. And then we cut back to the firehouse where he leans out of his bed and falls down. The idea being he's been doing so much of this work that now he's starting to have erotic dreams about ghosts.
I don't know how that survived the cut.
It feels like something that should have been left on the cutting room floor.
This is not what was actually in the original script.
Now, this is a much edited and not too graphic version of what originally was planned for the film.
If you read the novelization of the film, which is based on an earlier draft of the script, Stans and Zeddemore, Ernie Hudson's character, who also totally got the shaft, his character was far more developed in the earlier versions when it was supposed to be Eddie Murphy playing the character. They go to investigate at like an old historic fort or something in New York, and there is a deleted scene that you can find on the Ghostbusters YouTube channel. They released it for like the 35th anniversary, this deleted scene, or some of it, where they pull up and they were supposed to go investigate, and Ray and Winston were going to separate and go into different areas looking for this ghost, and Ray goes into an area with like costumes and decorations, decides to try on the coat and look at himself in the mirror and like jump in the bed just because he's being lazy. And then he legitimately gets filleted by a ghost. And the whole gag is the, like, not all ghosts are bad.
In the original script and actually what was filmed, Ray does have a sexual relationship with a person that has been dead for 100 years. But the scene was too long. It was in the wrong place of the film.
And, like, Winston comes back because he hears noise and like is banging on the door and being like, Ray, are you in there? Do you need help? And he's like, leave me alone, or just a few minutes, or some weird joke like that. Like, I'm really happy that didn't make it into the final cut of the film.
And everyone involved with the film, director included, loved the notion that Ray was in a relationship with a ghost, but Ivan came up with the idea of treating it as a dream instead and inserted it into the very end of the montage. So this actual full-on scene does exist somewhere.
But yeah, that actually happened.
But yeah, there's that. That's a thing that was in this movie.
And then nobody ever speaks of it again.
This brings a whole new meaning to the phrase "Bustin' makes me feel good" by Ray Parker Jr. in the Ghostbusters theme song. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Bustin' makes me, bustin' makes me, bustin' makes me feel good.
I've always loved Janine, the secretary. Ghostbusters, what do you want?
She's kind of the receptionist. She's in the movie. She's very New York. She's very abrasive. She basically puts on an act that she doesn't like working there. You know, she thinks it's, I don't know if it's beneath her, but she doesn't like putting up with like Peter, for because I guess Peter's kind of like the boss, so she didn't like him much. Later, the weird thing with Janine is in the movie, she doesn't do much, and she isn't really all that interesting. But later on, and I'll talk about this a little bit near the end, but there was a cartoon, Real Ghostbusters, which really followed these characters too. And Janine had a lot more to do in the cartoon, and was a lot more interesting in the cartoon than she is actually in the movie.
At the end of the montage, we see that business has picked up, they're doing very well, and that they need help. So the team hires Winston Zeddemore, who is played by Ernie Hudson.
Of all the people who belong on this team, Zeddemore and the phone answering girl are really the only two that have any right to be here, realistically, because they just want money. They're just there for a job. The other people are only here because they were written to be here.
The fourth Ghostbuster is Winston Zeddemore, but he actually is probably my favorite Ghostbuster now, because he kind of comes in mid-season. He's basically answering an ad, a help wanted ad.
Janine asks, do you believe in UFOs, astral projections, mental telepathy, ESP clairvoyance, spirit photography, telekinetic movement, full trance mediums, the Loch Ness Monster, and the theory of Atlantis? Winston says, if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say.
And he's just your normal everyday guy, just wanting to make it's a job to him. The fact that you're doing something as spectacular as busting ghosts, and what the job is, it's not necessarily lost on him, but it isn't as important as, hey, he just wants a steady paycheck. Really, the only other notable character I can think of is, what's his full name? Something Peck. Wow.
Walter Peck is an asshole.
William Atherton plays Walter Peck to perfection.
I love the character actor, though. He was also in Die Hard 1 and 2. Looking older then, though.
If you can make me hate your face when you're just acting, you've done your job well.
The Ghostbusters get placed, unfortunately, in the crosshairs of Inspector Walter Peck. He works for the Environmental Protection Agency.
He's kind of an antagonist. He's a weird kind of an antagonist because he's not a ghost. He's not actually something when they fight, but he gets in their way.
There's rumors that this man has no dick. I don't know if that'll be revealed later in the movie. We'll have to find out.
My favorite line. The audience favorite is "This man has no dick." There were also multiple takes of that and multiple jokes that could have made it into the film. I believe that's also on the Ghostbusters YouTube page, if you're curious to see what else Venkman might have said in that moment.
And at first, he goes in there and he's wanting to inspect the place and make sure everything's up to code or whatever. And he's actually rather polite. And Peter Venkman is basically an
But he would like to evaluate their equipment and is rebuffed by Venkman and leaves in a huff.
The weird thing about Peck is I think he didn't need to be an enemy, but Peter made him an enemy. He wasn't really. It's hard telling what would have happened if you just let him do his inspections or whatever. Odds are there probably have been like permits, questions, and whatever, but it probably wouldn't have ended up doing what ended up happening in the movie.
And the fact that ruined that man's career, that poor actor, that is it Richard something off the top of my head? I don't know, but the actor that played Walter Peck. Like, everywhere he went for years, a school bus would drive by and the kids would shout, "Hey, Dickless," at him. Like, I cannot imagine having to deal with that, all because Bill Murray decided to improvise a line.
Very, very huffy man, that Walter Peck.
I gotta admit, as much of a jerk as that EPA guy is, he's kind of right to be concerned about a group of unlicensed guys with a nuclear reactor in their basement of a rundown firehouse in the middle of New York City.
Keeping all of your ghosts in some sort of nuclear reactor core storage place in one building in a neighborhood never made sense to me.
Yeah, all sorts of red flags there.
You'd think they would at least build a new one when they're rolling in cash.
Dana is missing a classic party.
Rick Moranis' idea of a fun party is Twister and breakdancing?
I would never miss a classic party.
What kind of accountant are you?
There's so much good in this film and so much, you have all of the performances by Rick Moranis, who again was not originally supposed to be that character. That was supposed to be John Candy, who passed saying he didn't get it. He didn't quite get the character. He didn't know how he was going to approach it. And Rick Moranis comes in and just destroys it. And he has this whole long spiel where he talks about, it's a long shot actually. It's the long shot in the film is Rick Moranis talking to his clients and having the party and telling them about, how he gets a generic medicine and how he's writing all of this off as a tax expense. And that was, I believe, all improvised. Or he just came up with all of that himself riffing.
I mean, that blonde is pretty hot for the 1980s, and even she was like, "Sure, I'll dance with you." What? Even discount fish isn't worth it.
So there's something about all of Rick Moranis' stuff that's pretty fantastic as well.
Yeah, and then probably the scariest moment of the movie is, I forgot all the characters' names, but Sigourney Weaver, her character, when she's being possessed and she's sitting in the chair and all the arms just grab her all over, that was pretty spooky for a comedy movie, I have to say.
I really dig this Nightmare on Elm Street stuff going on with the door, and I still enjoy the design of the gargoyle dogs. Those are cool.
Peter arrives at Dana's apartment to find her possessed by Zool, claiming to be the gatekeeper.
Not gonna lie, the scene where Dana becomes possessed by Zool might have been a revelation to a young Eric.
Hey, both regular and new Dana hate Venkman. Red flag, anyone?
Sigourney Weaver's amazing. That's all I'm gonna say.
Followed by, there is no Dana, only Zool.
Lewis, who has also been possessed, is found by the cops, brought to Egon at Ghostbuster headquarters. He claims to be Vince Clortho, the Keymaster.
I am Vince Clortho, Keymaster of Gozer, Vulgus Zilderhar, Lord of Sibulia. Are you the gatekeeper? It's a really dumb line, but I like all of just... This line probably has the single most amount of creativity in it for the whole film. Just this one line. Someone had to think of all this stuff.
And the Ghostbusters agree that they should keep the gatekeeper and the Keymaster separated. Peter sedates Dana/Zool and heads back towards headquarters.
The story itself is pretty solid as well, despite a few questions I may have. The how and the why always felt pretty solid, but the appearance of ghosts never felt fully explained.
Long story short, once the Ghostbusters become the Ghostbusters, at first they kind of look like as a joke, but then these ghosts, the presence start increasing. You know, the ghost sightings and interactions start getting really insane, and they start getting pretty popular.
And look, it may not be important, but just one line could possibly explain why there was just this sudden uptick in supernatural activity all of a sudden.
Peter meets with Dana to inform her that Zool, the name that she heard in her apartment, was a demigod worshipped as a servant for Gozer the Gozerian, who was a shape-shifting god of destruction. They agree that they'll be going on a date later. Dana returns home, where she is possessed by Zool. A similar entity then goes after her neighbor Lewis and possesses him.
So the other ghosts you have the Keymaster and Gatekeeper. I kind of put those two together because they're basically the same kind of ghost, but there are two pairs of the same ghost. And when they get together, they basically cause the main problem in the movie. Most of the movie, they're trying to keep those two apart. Well, they're not sure if they need to get them together or not, but they're trying to keep them apart. And when they get together, that's when the climax happens. And then you meet Zool, which is really cool.
Gotta love the Twinkie reference.
Walter Peck returns to the headquarters during that time with law enforcement. They shut down the containment unit, causes an explosion that releases all of the captured ghosts throughout New York City.
Sure, there's the random occurrence here and there, and certainly when the containment grid is shut down. But what was the sudden happening that triggered their busy days other than end of days or whatever?
And by the end of the movie, they are stopping an elder god and a giant marshmallow man in the streets of New York and are looked at as heroes. And it's pretty funny how quick the city of New York goes from like, who are these idiots, to like, yeah, ghosts are real. No big deal. What are you going to do about it? It's just, I don't know. I thought that was funny.
The music they chose to play while all the ghosts are being released is so insanely chill. And like, this is supposed to be the end of the world. And there's this huge like dissonance there that really just turns me off from this scene.
What triggered Gozer at that moment in time?
During the chaos and confusion, Lewis ends up escaping and makes his way to the apartment to join Dana, while Walter Peck has the Ghostbusters incarcerated.
So this is how I'm dumb. In the beginning of the movie, I'm like, wait, why does this building have an altar at the top? That's very convenient for the end of the movie. And then Ray explains everything to me later on.
In jail, Ray and Egon reveal that Dana's building was designed by Ivo Shandor. He was the leader of a Gozer-worshipping cult, and the entire purpose of the building was to function as an antenna to attract and concentrate spiritual energy to summon Gozer and bring about the apocalypse. I guess if you're bored, that makes sense. Plenty to do on a Sunday.
We do get some decent exposition in the jail scene about Ivo Shandor and how Dana's apartment building acts as a beacon of sorts. But why her? Why Lewis?
The two dog ghosts, they didn't start out as ghosts, they started out as individual people. Due to the nature of this building, they become basically focal points for the supernatural activities going on in the city. And they become possessed by these two individual ghosts. When they first appear, they are dogs, and they basically attack these two individuals, but that's how they end up possessing them. Then near the climax, they actually turn back into those dogs.
So the references to Sumerian gods was clever because in Sumerian mythology, unlike most spiritual beliefs since then, the gods were actively out to destroy humanity. For a quick history note, the Sumerians are one of the earliest known human civilizations, based out of Mesopotamia, which later became the Babylonian Empire and what is now known as modern-day Iraq. And because they lived in such a harsh environment, in the desert where it was constantly being flooded and attacked by enemies from all sides, it's not hard to understand why they thought their gods were malicious and out to get them.
Now that New York is currently faced with supernatural chaos all across the city, the Ghostbusters are able to convince the mayor to release them to do their job. And oh hey, look, we find out that Walter Peck does indeed have no dick.
I don't know, it just feels like there's one teeny tiny little piece missing. But it's a minor gripe.
The Ghostbusters are allowed to travel to the apartment building, and they begin to ascend to the roof, which the building, it's weird because the building looks bigger in different shots. They only end up going to floor 22 where Dana's apartment is, but sometimes in the skyline, this building looks like it's 50 stories instead of 25-ish stories.
The ending set piece where they face off against Zul and Gozer, the Destroyer, is one of the coolest action set pieces in pretty much anything from that time.
It's actually a really cool scene right before the climaxes. They talk to the mayor, basically convince the mayor, hey, this is a problem we need to deal with. And basically you have like this big like police escort, like all the emergency vehicles, and you have like Ecto 1.
You know, I could just keep going and going and going. But the climax is fantastic, having to walk up all the stairs and complaining about that.
We also get to find out that Winston's making $11,500 a year. So today, around $30,000. Yeah, dude, you're not making enough.
Anyways, we then see Dana and Lewis at the top, and they're about to... Wait a second. Lewis's belt is undone. Did Dana and Lewis actually procreate? Did they do the sex? They had to have. That was the whole thing. Because Dana wanted Peter as the keymaster to do the... Oh, no wonder Lewis is smiling at the end of the movie. I never noticed that as a kid. Huh. Anyways, Dana and Lewis, after fornicating, open the gate between dimensions and they transform into Demonic dogs. Woof.
It keeps building to things and then throwing a joke in and then delivering on the build-up. It's fantastic.
The Ghostbusters arrive at the top of the building. Gozer appears in the form of a woman, and Ray is nominated as the person to go and interact with her.
Oh, Gozer is very 1980s.
I love that entire scene where she appears and Ray Stantz goes up or confronts her, tells her to go back to her nearest parallel dimension.
Just remember, if anyone asks if you are a god, you say yes.
Are you a god? No. She blasts and all.
Ray did not, so Gozer attacks them.
Ray, when someone asks if you're a god, you say yes.
Winston's there. It's like, someone asked you if you're a god, you say yes. Especially if you're dealing with supernatural stuff like this, I would think.
The choose your death.
When they attempt to retaliate, she simply disappears, and her disembodied voice demands that the Ghostbusters choose a form of their destructor.
And then they're all right, clear your minds, nobody think of anything. And then Ray immediately thinks of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And what did you do, Ray?
And instead of emptying their minds like they should have, Ray inadvertently recalls his beloved corporate mascot from his childhood, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
The Stay Puft reveal never gets old.
Ray's expression when he realizes what he created is probably... It's definitely his single best scene in this entire movie.
But then the other one's Gozer. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand who was Gozer. I thought it was Zul, the girl. I didn't know why those names were being bandied about. But now Gozer is basically who Zul summons to do this reckoning on the Earth. And I guess he's come back before several times. Well, basically she allows the Ghostbusters to choose the form of Gozer, and what they chose is the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man is Gozer. And it's such a... the movie's a comedy. It's played for laughs, but it is hilarious.
Now, if you're anything like me, you probably looked at him and said, man, how many s'mores could I make that guy into? Well, someone went and did the math for me, so I don't have to figure it out. And they figured out that the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man could make 300 million standard-sized marshmallows. So if you use the proper recipe for a s'more, which is recommending 2 marshmallows per s'more, you can make around 150 million s'mores. That's roughly half of the people in America. You get another 75 million Hershey bars on top of that. You're golden, my friend. Cook that guy up.
It definitely feels like a segment of a classic kaiju movie.
And it makes something that, like Ray says, something that couldn't possibly destroy you into something that can very well easily destroy you. Of course, now the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like in later things, he keeps coming back as his own entity. He's not really related to Gozer, and I think that's why especially as a kid, I was confused as to who Gozer was. That's him.
Stay Puft appears and begins attacking the city. The Ghostbusters attempt to hold him off with their proton packs, but end up lighting him and the building on fire.
He seems like he'd be something really easy to deal with, but just the mass of it, I guess, is a big problem. Plus, he probably has more supernatural strength. He can't just like blow him up, especially inside of a city. But I don't see him like destroying more than New York, even if he was let loose. Eventually, someone's going to bring out the jet planes and start bombing the game. But they didn't come to that. They, of course, resolved all that.
Now, even though earlier Egon says don't cross the streams, he believes that's the only way they will be able to close the gate. So the team pull out their proton guns, they engage all 4 streams, and direct it at the dimensional gate.
They reverse the streams, everything blows up.
The resulting explosion destroys Gozer's avatar, it banishes the demon back to its dimension, and ends up closing the gateway for good, we think.
It does feel kind of weird that after all the warnings about crossing the streams, there wasn't any bad side effects to doing so.
The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man exploded, sending marshmallow in every direction. The Ghostbusters are covered in it, other than Peter, because he was the only smart one to run down the stairs.
But everyone except Peter Venkman is covered in just head to toe. Look at like a little snowman walking around. He has a little bit of like the stuff in his hair or like his clothes, but not much.
The actor that plays Walter Peck, I think, didn't know he was getting dumped on by that much foam at the end and actually like knocked him to the ground and hurt himself doing it or something along those lines.
We believe Dana and Lewis are dead. They look like fried demon dogs, but it turns out that Dana and Lewis are still alive. They're just inside the charred remains.
So at the very end there, of course, the dogs are kind of fried a little bit, but the 2 individuals are still alive. They basically break out of this shell or whatever.
Ray's line to Rick Moranis' character at the end, or the "Who does your taxes?" He's like, "Sounds good." Like, I'd like to take some brain tissue samples. Sounds good.
The Ghostbusters are able to rescue them, leave the wreckage, and are welcomed on the street as heroes.
So Peter ends up getting the girl, and the movie just kind of ends right there. The ending credits kind of roll as they're coming out of the building as heroes. Everybody's cheering for them. Hey, yeah, we won. Which is, it's an okay ending. There's no real, they don't really linger on the after climax in the movie, which is fine. It works. These are the conquering heroes.
I don't know. Can I say the whole movie? This thing feels so sharply written. Again, there's something about this film where it's just lightning caught in a bottle.
Oh yeah, now we're back to the theme song. That's right. And you know what? You heard it. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Everything about this movie is iconic.
I don't care what anyone says. The original Ghostbusters from 1984 is a masterpiece.
Yeah, I mean, to wrap up, Ghostbusters is not only one of the best movies from the 1980s, not only one of the best movies, the Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd movies, but one of the best movies, period, in my opinion. I mean, it's hard to top.
This is one of those films that got better as I got older, truly appreciating the humor, the horror, the acting, everything.
Overall, I really like the movie.
So overall, I don't really like this movie.
It's so damn good.
I don't find there to be much comedy, like comedy that I resonate with.
I have to ignore the whole Venkman being awful bit.
Bill Murray is the obvious standout here with some of the best lines in the film.
But other than that, it's a good movie. It's a great blend of horror and comedy. Like, the comedy is not like I expected it to be more slapstick, and it's not. I mean, they have some cheesy stuff about crossing streams, but it still totally works.
It's really hard to top, especially from that era. You give me any movie within a 5-year period before or after, and it's going to be very, very tough for it to beat Ghostbusters.
Yeah, so Ghostbusters is a great movie.
Everybody loves Ghostbusters. There are children that know who they are. I know Stranger Things helped, but we haven't had a cartoon since the Extreme Ghostbusters, which I believe was also in the 90s. One of the guys that's in a couple of the franchises that I'm a part of, he's a part of 3. He has it's a Ford Fusion, but he decked it out in Ghostbusters logos because that's what Ghostbusters fans do. They buy white cars and then put Ghostbusters stickers all over them. And we were hanging out at my house last night, and he came over, and my neighbor's kids are, floored because they see, and it's a white Ford Fusion, but it's got the Ghostbusters logo. It's got the caution stripe on it from the Ecto-1A from Ghostbusters 2. It's got all the, we believe you, give us a call, all of this information. This stuff You want to talk about a pop culture zeitgeist before the age of the internet, when it was just a bunch of people loving a thing and then very strong marketing campaigns once the movie came out. Like, they had to make promo things to try and get theaters to pick up this film and try to tell them what this film even was. Like, is it okay for kids? Is it an action? Is it a comedy? Is it a horror film? Yeah, I don't know. It's nuts.
Well, back to the ghosts. There's really only four other ghosts. The mainline ghosts. There's other ghosts that make appearances. As for what my favorite one is, I don't even know how to answer that.
The ghosts in this movie are so iconic because they didn't go for huge effects every 3 minutes.
Yeah, I love the practical effects in this. They're great.
All the budget was spent correctly, so there's no, best ghosts. They all rock.
The one thing I want to bring up before I forget, probably the two most famous non-Ghostbuster characters are two of the, I guess we can call them ghosts, Slimer and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Librarian, Slimer, Stay Puft, the Undead Cabbie. Sure, we get to keep Slimer and Stay Puft for the comics and cartoons, but it's still a great cast.
Zool is one thing, it's an elder god, and you got the weird hoodoo that turns Lewis and Dana into those weird dogs, but everyone else is a ghost. You see the cab driver and the people from the Titanic, which is actually really cool. The librarian, they're actually ghosts. Slimer, I don't know what Slimer was supposed to have been before he died, or if he's not deceased, but rather just this weird ectoplasm being. And then, of course, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, not really a ghost, more of a manifestation. But it is really funny that the two most iconic adversaries, we'll call them, in this movie are not really ghosts in the traditional sense, although Slimer is kind of see-through and is really great. I mean, the effects on Slimer are fantastic.
I like that the villain was a little underwhelming at the very end. I felt like they wrapped that up really quick, but something about that worked. Them, crossing the streams, defeating them. Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing worked for me.
Honestly, I don't know what else to say about this movie besides it's practically perfect. I mean, it's hilarious. It's infinitely quotable, memorable. There's so many memorable scenes, characters, special effects.
I'm a big fan of, listen, do you smell something? There's a lot of just cleverness in this film. Boy, I don't know. I'm replaying the entire movie in my head. I've seen shit that'll turn you white.
The first time they see the Ghostbusters, the proton packs in that really fancy hotel, and Venkman's making a joke about someone called the exterminator, cockroaches, and
I mean, he had so many good responses and one-liners. We've been going about this all wrong. Mr. Stay Puft, he's okay. He's a sailor. He's in New York. We get this guy laid, we won't have any trouble. Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
It's just so damn good.
The best line in this movie is, "We should split up so we can do more damage that way."
When Ray asks, "Where do these stairs go?" Venkman responds, "They go up," in the most serious tone possible. Classic.
It's so damn good.
I think my favorite one is when they're in the elevator on their first assignment to go catch Slimer, and Peter says, "Why worry? Each one of us is carrying an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back." And then Ray says, "Yeah, we better test it. Switch me on." And Egon switches on the backpack, and you hear the nuclear backpack just start powering up, and they slowly both slide into the corner. Like somehow that's going to save you in an elevator.
And honestly, I feel like some of the best comedy in this entire film are completely overshadowed by the SNL skits. There's one line, it's Venkman or Ray was like, "Listen, do you smell that?" And it's so great. It's such this perfect little line that's just run over really quickly.
It really is kind of all of these guys who were all, no offense, man, but discounting Ernie Hudson, Rick Moranis, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, these are some of the biggest names in comedy in the 1980s. They made some of the biggest movies. And this, in my opinion, is all of them at the height of their powers, quote unquote. Although Bill Murray in What About Bob is pretty incredible, and as well as Groundhog Day.
And shortly after that, they have the scene where the phone chick is talking about how they'll be extremely discreet, and then they immediately walk through the front door of the hotel in full gear, and Venkman starts yelling very loudly. I think if the film had more of those moments, I would like this a lot more. But it's one of those, it's just everything is allowed to go on just a little too long or be a little too, I don't know, look at me, I am funny, as opposed to just actually being funny.
It's so damn good.
But that's Ghostbusters, though. There's a lot of nostalgia in Ghostbusters, especially if you grew up with it like I did.
God, I don't know. I can just sit here and I can just keep talking about this movie because I freaking love this movie so much and there's so much to know. And again, literally everything in this movie is iconic. The building itself in New York where they filmed it, even though they faked the top of it, still gets people going and visiting it and taking photos of it.
This one does a really good job of setting up an entire franchise with so much potential. It's just too bad that the sequel kind of squandered it.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I could go scene by scene and break this whole movie down and tell you how every freaking scene is so perfectly acted, if not acted and written and directed.
Because looking back, it was just still a good movie, and it's kind of a cool concept, but it was almost a cultural phenomenon in the mid-'80s up until Ghostbusters 2 killed it, but I guess we'll get there later.
And we got this incredible thing that they have tried to recreate multiple times and never have.
To me, they really captured lightning in a bottle. So it's really no wonder why they've really had a hard time replicating it since then.
There's a YouTuber that I really like called Patrick Willems, who has a video about how the real successor to Ghostbusters is not Ghostbusters 2, is not Ghostbusters Answer the Call, is not the video game, but is actually Men in Black as the next film that sort of really captured that perfection in, just about every way and had that sort of lightning in a bottle quality.
Reitman did such a great job with this movie, and hopefully his son, Jason Reitman, is able to kind of recapture some of the same magic for Ghostbusters Afterlife, because everything that's come after this one has been,
I do understand why people that are huge fans of this movie would dislike the 2016 version with the female-led one, because those people probably all think that like Venkman's like the best character ever when he sucks. I'm sorry to hammer on about that, but it's true.
In any case, Ghostbusters is one of those 80s classics that boggles the mind when you look back on it.
Behind the scenes trivia. Oh, we actually covered some of that. I'm a big Ghostbusters fan. I'm wearing a Ghostbusters t-shirt today just because. Like I said, I'm part of multiple Ghostbusters franchises here in Minnesota, Ecto MX5 and the North Star Ghostbusters. I know a lot about this movie, so I don't know how much random trivia that I want to throw at you. I mean, there's supposedly the woman who was pushing the cart in the Sedgwick Hotel that gets lit up by the proton packs. Had no idea that was happening. Her reaction was genuine.
So I really think a lot of the popularity with Ghostbusters had to come down to just one, the names, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Rick Moranis, Sigourney Weaver. They were all extremely popular by this point. And then marketing.
The fact that in the film they show them switching on the proton packs with the switch on the back in that scene in the elevator, and that there is no switch there on the proton packs. What each of the parts of the proton packs are called, I know most of them. Other members of my franchises are like, they built their own packs from scratch. Mine is not. I have a modded Spirit Halloween pack. Yeah, I mean, the reason for the proton packs and why that technology works, and all this stuff is available out there. They put out a lot of lore in the video game. There's also handbooks you can buy for the Ecto one, for the proton pack. They have Tobin's Spirit Guide, which I've never read, but that's out there. So there's a whole lot of, and then of course there's all the comic books and yeah, there's a lot out there.
Like, that's it. But I don't honestly think it's a good movie.
Everybody loves Ghostbusters.
Everything that works are things that weren't planned from the start. What would this film have been if Harold Ramis didn't play Egon? Or if the film had been an intergalactic horror flick? Or if the film had been called Ghost Stoppers or Ghost Smashers? This film opened the same day as Gremlins, if you can believe that. You never know what's going to become a classic. And 2 came out on the same day. This film is a great example of all the right pieces coming together for the perfect picture.
Oh, and if you haven't seen it already, definitely check out The Movies That Made Us on Netflix. They did an episode about Ghostbusters, and it's fantastic.
So yeah, Peter Venkman is easily one of the most quotable movie characters of all time.
People probably all think that like Venkman's like the best character ever when he sucks. I'm sorry to hammer on about that, but it's true.
That said, I enjoyed the other movies for what they are, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what's in store with the new film, Ghostbusters Afterlife.
It's true. I hope he's better in the new one. I meant to be positive about this.
God, I love Ghostbusters.
Now, with this season of Podcasters Assemble, we started with the original movie. We're going to be hitting Ghostbusters 2 1989 next. We've got the reboot of Ghostbusters in 2016. We've also got a couple bonuses in there of the real Ghostbusters 1986 animated series and the Ghostbusters video game from 2009, which was a reimagining of the canceled Ghostbusters 3 movie that never came to be. All counting down to Ghostbusters Afterlife, which is supposedly coming out November? Maybe? Hopefully it's not like James Bond, because I don't know if that season of Podcasters Assemble has technically ended.
Well, I better not make it too much longer, so I'll go ahead and cut it off here, and I'll see you next time.
One of the things I am very much looking forward to is the spin-off of the series that we do, Podcasters Disassembled, that Eric Slater and myself started last month, and we are going to be incorporating the Ghostbusters into that because we're focusing on related films. We'll be featuring the Ghostbusters, which was a live-action children's sitcom. It ran back in 1975 for about 15 episodes, and then after that they had the Ghostbusters 1986 TV series that actually started 5 days before the real Ghostbusters, which was based off the movie that we just talked about. And I remember the Ghostbusters cartoon, which was based upon, it's known as Filmation's Ghostbusters, and it had two guys and a gorilla, and they were hunting ghosts. I vaguely remember the intro and a little bit about the show. I don't remember the live action show at all, so that is going to be a trip. I'm probably going to have to be drinking to to get through that one.
All right, so join us next time as we begin our descent into madness with Ghostbusters 2.
Man, number 1 was so great. Number 2 can only be better, right, Corey? Yeah, I know. Number 2 is your favorite, right, buddy?
And the first of maybe not the first, but a long line of bizarre 80s sequels that, through a ridiculous amount of varying degrees of success. You had Ghostbusters 2, Gremlins 2, Karate Kid 2, Back to the Future 2. I mean, pretty much everything that was successful at the beginning of the 80s had at least one sequel, and a lot of them were pretty crap, and this, unfortunately, will be one of them.
And no, I'm not forgetting Winston, but he didn't really shine until 2, at least from my memories.
I am very curious to see more of him in the sequel, which I hear is bad.
I'm probably going to have to drink for Ghostbusters 2. I don't know. Everyone seems to hate that movie, and I don't remember how good or bad it was.
But hopefully it's good. Hopefully everyone I've ever met has lied to me. Not everyone I've ever met has lied to me about Ghostbusters, because not that many people have ever talked to me about Ghostbusters.
The Ghostcasters will return in Ghostbusters 2.
At the stroke of midnight, on New Year's Eve of the last decade of the 20th century, America's largest city is about to pay for the nastiness of its inhabitants. When that day comes, when the slime starts to rise,
the Titanic just arrived.
When ghosts start arriving by the boatload,
We gotta find the guys.
there's only one thing to do.
Look out! Look out! Sometimes weird things happen. Someone has to deal with it. And who are you gonna call?
So yeah, Peter Venkman is easily one of the most quotable movie characters of all time. Just wanted to make sure that that is known and that we can all agree on that fact.
Who you gonna call?
Bustin' makes me feel good.
Podcasters Assemble is a production of the We Can Make This Work, probably, Podcast Network. Find more of our shows at probablywork.com and learn how to contribute to future episodes of Podcasters Assemble by looking us up on Twitter and Instagram at Casters Assemble or joining our Discord page. Link in the show notes. Submissions are always open. Intro written by Justin Aki. Music by Deft Stroke Sound. Voiceover by a guy in a basement with 3 daughters who's just glad he's not on food stamps. This episode was edited by Eric Slater. Thank you to everyone who was able to contribute to this episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to where you can find them all online. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the We Can Make This Work
Probably Network.
Follow us on Twitter
@ProbablyWork
for more of our questionable content.
Also, we have a website called probablywork.com.
Podcasters, assemble. Come on, let's run some red lights.
Testing. 1, 2. Okay. Podcasters, assemble!
All right, Zach. Well, let's see if we can get this done for him.
Whoa, somebody's coming. It's probably Eric Slater.
I'm already looking at the time I'm recording here, and I'm coming up on 13 minutes, and we're supposed to say no more than 15. Haha, then don't ask me to record things.
Ecto 1, which is their car, which I know I've not talked about, which I should talk about real briefly here at the very end, because I've kind of gone a little bit long. But
oh man, I know this is going to be a nightmare to edit, so I apologize, because I know I'm jumping back and forth. I feel like I haven't nearly said everything that I want to about this film.
Intro written by, I don't know, who's the intro written by? Somebody tell me. It's not on my notes. It's not, I've got nothing to work with here, people. Intro written by someone's name goes here. That's all I've got.
He's the man, the myth, the legend with the magical editing fingers. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where any of this shit comes from. You know this, Eric.
I guess one of the funniest ones actually isn't nope, that's Ghostbusters 2. See, I'm gonna get all lost here.
I don't know. I'm sorry to whoever's editing this that my thoughts are not more organized.
Start these, random babble. Hell if I know where it's going.
And, we're obviously always, striving to find the answers to some of the big questions, but at the end of the day, we just don't know.
Good to be submitting again. I think you're doing this one, and then I'm doing Ghostbusters 2. So, cheers. Cheers, bucko.
I don't want to go on forever, so I'm purposefully not kind of going through the movie and breaking down scene by scene.
You survived the most. See, I'm not going to remember it off the top of my head now because I'm forcing myself to try to remember. Because there's the interdimensional cross rip of 1909.
Just that you have less you have to deal with in the editing. And Eric, if that's you, hope you're feeling better, bud.
This episode was edited by another name that needs to go here, people. Anybody helping me out? It's nothing? Damn it.
He's technically a science.
Today I'm going to tell you...
Add in a dash of horror, a splash of cutting edge special effects.
They charged $5,000 to capture your slip.
Vince Clorzo.
Anyway, the two dog ghosts, of course, they didn't start out as ghosts. They started out as individual people.
During the confusion, Lois... Yes, because this is Superman. No. During the chaos and confusion, Lewis ends up escaping and makes his way to the apartment.
He's a neighbor of, I can't remember his name, Seymour, I think. But then again, Seymour is who Rick Moranis is in Little Shop of Horrors, so I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong, in fact.
Vince Clortho.
I don't remember who it was that played Egon. I think something Raimi. His name's escaping me.
The actor that plays and of course now I'm going to start brain farting.
The Ghostbusters, the 1975 children's series. That's my cat that you're probably hearing right now. That's great. Let's try this again.
Ooh, I got to go listen to that audio file again to pronounce Corey's name. Dude, Corey, can't you just have like a last name of Smith or something? Hold on, stand by. All right, got it. Justin A. I couldn't pass that up. Justin Aki. Zach the Douche Derby.
But he's he's very business savvy. He's not so much, scientist type person, or even really so much like a physical guy, as far as like, tough or in that respect. He's Bill Murray. If you know who Bill Murray is, you know he had and this is where Bill Murray comes and kicks my butt for me. But
oh, I just remembered Bill Murray's character's name in this movie because I was going to make a joke about it. His name is Vinkman, and I was going to be like more like Stinkman because he sucks and he's an awful person.
Yeah, there's still a lot of mysteries to the universe that science hasn't quite cracked yet. And whether or not souls exist in some ethereal plane of existence is one of those things. Just like UFOs or UAPs, there are a lot of unexplained sightings and incidents from thousands of eyewitnesses, but we don't quite know what to make of it in a lot of cases.
But he's from some kind of government agency that's like health and safety or something like that.
Bigfoot, however, that's pretty easy to rule out since the guy who made the video from the 70s actually came out and admitted that it was all a hoax.
This brings a whole new meaning to the phrase "Bustin' makes me feel good" by Ray Parker Jr. in the Ghostbusters theme song. Eric, I'm not going to say that again. I am 3 bourbons in after recording Neatcast, so you can do the editing. I'll make you pay for it during Ghostbusters 2.
Sorry, Eric, that I mainly talked about Bustin' making me feel good and how Vinkman sucks. Like, that. There's other things in this movie, I'm sure. Bustin' makes me feel good.
Ooh, Ghostbusters! Bustin' makes me feel good! Yeah, I'm sure that's going to get used somewhere. Why do I even talk? Why do I do this to myself? So, I guess I will chat with you, at that time. That makes no sense. I guess I'll talk to you for Ghostbusters 2. So until then, Ghostcasters, assemble.
Ghostcasters, assemble.
Bustin' makes me feel good.
Thank you. Jingle. Oh, okay.
There is no Dana, only Zool.